It's really a pleasure for me to have you here, Fredric Benesch and Katarina Lundeberg. I know you since a long time. We're good friends. We know each other's work very well. And that's why it was interesting for me to bring you to my course, because we both believe in architecture and what we can do with architecture. And that's an important way of working. And this series I'm doing at the moment with my students is about the possibilities of what we can do with architecture and change. Fredric, we met each other in Rome a very long time ago, and have followed each other's path. We even worked in Tours at your concepts office then, and went back to Sweden, and you opened together your office with Katarina while you were teaching. Katarina, you had a different way a little bit. You were in Denmark studying at your own office, and when you were teaching together with Fredric, you opened together the office In Praise of Shadow, which is not a name of an office, of a general office. It's more a name of a theme where you're interested in, based on the book In Praise of Shadows by the Japanese writer Tanizaki, where you talk about light, about architecture, about materiality, and I think there you meet very much, and there out of this you really develop your work and your profession. That's a little bit why we published some years ago as well this book on your work, What They Would. It's about your work and your position in architecture, and this was 2018, and now some years happened, some things continued, and I'm quite interested to see what really happened during this time. We were a bit separated through COVID. We haven't traveled so much, and I'm really happy to have you here and to talk about architecture and to listen to your thoughts and how you approach in Stockholm your themes. Yes, you want to start?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much for inviting us. As you say, we have met quite often during the years, and Daniel has showed us quite a lot of interesting projects in Switzerland. We have been all over in Graubünden and seen good wooden projects that has inspired us also. And we, as an office, In Praise of Shadows, as Daniel says, we have tried to have a wide approach to architecture. And our aim is, of course, to do a sustainable architecture. And in some ways, we feel that our tradition from Sweden with the wood architecture and to take care of nature has sort of just gotten all these subjects of sustainability even more important. But it's a track that we already had started to follow. And we will introduce to you some projects of different kind of wood techniques. Some very massive wood projects in a smaller scale, some glulam pavilions and a mix of glulam and CLT, and then some built CLT projects, and finally some housing projects still on the drawing table, Daniel, because it takes so long time in Sweden. So let's start. As I said, we have a big tradition of wood buildings in Sweden, and to take care of our forests. We plant at least two trees for every one tree we take down. And both the building material, the foundation, the way you transport the goods to the building site is important for us. And of course, is all included in the global goals that we all work after. And as you will see, we have an interest in the very tight, specific detailing of wood, old wood or new wood. And we also have a big interest in the industrial process of working with newer materials as glulam and CLT.
And as you mentioned, Daniel, we took the name of our office from the book Embracing Shadows by Tanizaki, a book that we used or introduced to our students when we were teaching at the KTH. And it's written in the 40s in Japan as a reflection on the qualities, the traditional Japanese culture, when modernity and modernism comes to Japan when it opens up. And there are some in relationship to architecture, there are some nice sequences, notions on descriptions on the light through a paper wall, or the sound of your steps when you walk on the gravel in the garden, the special relationship between inside and out, the door spaces, all the qualities in Japanese architecture. So we took the name as a kind of a reminder for us in our practice, these tactile and sensual experiences. This kind of architecture as a very physical experience. It's kind of one focus for us. And the publication we did with Daniel then in 18 in relationship to the exhibition in Venice, then it was a summary of the exhibition projects until then. For us, these smaller projects and the exhibition projects are kind of research projects, the experiences we use to larger projects, and we try to give ourselves a new area to study or a challenge when these kind of smaller projects appear. So the book is kind of a story on that work and led up to the Pavilion in 2018. And that's kind of a process that goes on. So the lecture today will start kind of in this strategy that we formulated in the book. So one of our first, we had only been in business for a couple of years. We got to participate in the exhibition in the Nordic Pavilion in the Venice Biennale. It's called Lighthouses, and the task was to make an architectural object that would kind of reflect Nordic architecture tradition, the vision of the practice, and also a comment on the Nordic Pavilion in Venice by Norwegian architect Fredric. That is a beautiful structure in concrete with a two-layered grid as a roof. I mentioned to not let any of the Venice sun into the space, to create this space intended for display of art sculptures. And as you see, trees, usually even more than the ones that are there today, grow up through this open structure. This became like a role model for how we kind of have approached projects afterwards as well, because when starting with the white paper or empty space and having these tasks, we started with the drawing as a tool, investigating the geometry of the pavilion in itself, see what we can learn from the structure, see how we could generate new shapes and expressions out of it. So the footprint of our Elma installation is the same as the open space between these two layers of beam structure. And we also work with cutting angles in this object that relates to the sun angle in Venice, and treated the areas in different manners, also exploring the possibilities of this massive fresh wood that was collected from Royal Park in central Stockholm. The elm trees are taken down to stop the spreading of the Dutch elm disease. So it was also a comment on wood, the trees in the Swiss Pavilion, and a geometric study. It was then very very strict in its original shape. We have it now in our office, and over the years it has, of course, then deformed as these kind of really thick, massive wood pieces do.
Fredric, can you talk a bit louder?
Okay, I will. And just a few years later, we were asked if we were interested in working with the design of an Aesop store in Stockholm. Aesop is a global skincare brand based in Australia, and they were to open up their first store in Scandinavia, in Stockholm. Their concept is to work with local architects to get a unique design for each store, and all these kind of unique designs are their main strategy. And we presented here, we thought we could learn something from the way we worked with the Venice installation. So we continue the collaboration with Lismary Hoffman, carpenter, designer, artist that worked with how to handle these big, massive elm trees, and proposed to Aesop to form the three main events in the store: the sales situation, the demonstration sink, and a relax area in fresh, massive elm tree. We also thought, since the Aesop clients were also interested in the Embrace of Shadows book, they knew that book, so we took the opportunity also to relate a bit to the Japanese tradition of creating this sequence of spaces. So although a really small space, we worked very deliberately with the outdoor view, what you experience outside. Then the first step, you enter one space with the sink and the demonstration sink and the counter, and then there's a backspace clad in wood, also on walls and in the floor. That is a small seating and relax area. And these are some pictures that you can see in the back. The all wood environment. Sit on a piece of elm tree and have a leather cushion, a soft back, and you see the central piece which is done from a piece of elm tree over 100 years old that we found south of Stockholm. It has then deformed over time, but it gets more beautiful over the years. It was very fresh when it came, actually, also after drying a couple of months or so and being worked outdoor. Ants kept crawling out of the wood during the first months after installation. A few years later, we were asked to design a second space in Stockholm. The first one was in more posh inner city situation. The second one on Södermalm, different part of the city with a different attitude, more laid-back attitude. And their ambition here was to make a more relaxed situation, to create like a Swedish living room. And we had visited with the clients, my husband works at the Woodland Cemetery, these rooms, spaces where you wait before the funeral ceremony. And husband worked here with his veneer, goes from the bench up on the wall. And we appreciated this technique, and we had visited with our clients. So we thought that would be a totally different way of working with wood, to go from this massive fresh elm tree to work with a really thin veneer, and the possibility that it's kind of inherent in a veneer to bend it in one direction. And we developed the concept of a draped space, working with the veneered wood as a curtain wrapping. It's really small, it's only a 25 square meter space. Create this second store. Eventually we investigated for the veneers. We ended up with the older veneer. There's a nice warm tone to it without too much pattern. And it also is quite close to the teak wood on the facade of this building at the entrance floor. Also in the entrance areas to the house, you see it on the left of the picture. It's a warm wood. We also took some details from the entrance door, these rounded corners at the glass, to kind of connect this interior to the building itself as well. The floor is the existing concrete floor that we polished. Roof has a quite intense pink color, although you don't see how to be on base, not too much contact to it. And when investigating then how this could be produced today, we ended up with the Italian carpentry, Soloso Misura, outside Milan. They came here, they measured the space, and we developed how to build this together with them. They built it in sections, where they put the veneer on these sections correctly, so there was no molding involved. That they could form the veneer on top of these modules. But the walls were too high to be able to work with one veneer the whole height. So we developed this horizon, this shelf that splits the walls in two, but also connects the space and transforms as it goes around the space to be a display shelf. But it also becomes a handle to the hidden door in the back. Ties the space together. And here to right, also here, a small seating niche that will be integrated underneath the stair situation, space within the space. The shelves are in brass, cantilevering out from construction. For the counter, we work with solid wood just in the top to be able to create these double curved surfaces in the detail.
As a continuing investigation in different wood, we got a question from Wallpaper if we could make a pavilion for the exhibition Handcrafted in Salone del Mobile in Milan. And we got the assignment to work with Dinesen, which is a high quality wood floor, the Austrian cabinet maker, and do something together that you could use the wood planks, floor planks, but in a new way. So we used these different dimensions of the wood planks, both in plan and section, different dimensions, and we put in two very heavy original tree trunks from this Dinesen Douglas fir from Austria, and made this pavilion. It was exhibited in a car factory in Milan, and here you can see how we mounted it in Austria, testing, actually without any screws. This then was made so we could easily take it apart and exhibit it in the Venice Biennale in a 14th century palace. So then it was so heavy, so we had to take away these big tree benches that were in the original pavilion. Made this oak floor instead in Palazzo Bembo, just facing the Grand Canal. Then after it had been exhibition there and also in Austria, they just wanted to send it to become firewood. So then we thought we take the structure back home. It was possible to mount it as a flat package, like an IKEA package almost, and used it in the Swedish archipelago, making a kayak house for kayaks or teenagers sleeping over. The frames were mounted on 10 concrete pillars in the sort of blueberry ground. We tried to do it very carefully, not destroying the area around. And to contrast from the very fine interior, these frames, we took down 8 pine trees on the site. We had a carpenter who could cut this with the chainsaw and get some very nice facade planks to dry for one summer, and then puzzled it as a facade. So we thought we continued the tradition that Dinesen had to take down one tree at a time in the woods of Schwarzwald. And now we did the same here in the Swedish archipelago. This house is seen from above, so we also took some care of making a very nice copper roof. Yes. Another example of this quite massive wood experiment was when we were asked to make a sauna of logs, also in the Swedish archipelago. This was a couple who had spent some time in the north of Sweden, so they liked these log structures. And we understood that cannot cut in those everywhere. You have to have some thinking about the logic, how they are put together. And you also have to think about that the whole structure sinks about 5 centimeters because these logs, sort of pressure of the logs makes the house sink 5 centimeters. You can see the gap from the window here. You had to leave some spaces to let the house move. This is also a small house, 25 square meters, standing on concrete pillars that go approximately 2 meters down slope, and then it stands sort of free from the rock besides it. It's a vision of 3 small, like an outer space where you can have a bed, a sauna space, and a back space with a shower and toilet. And this is also, of course, a continuing transformation of the tradition of log houses. We wanted these joints to be seen both on the inside, of course, and on the outside, and that the plan was sort of thought about how we could get these walls and joints in a logical way. So it's like a box inside with the sauna, and we worked on that you could see through the house. Small house, but you can see through it. Here you see stands on it quite high concrete plinths that also goes 2 meters down in the slope.
Yes, and then for the Venice Biennale in 18, we were invited by, it was a collaboration by Sweden, Swedish Wood, the Association of the Swedish Wood Industry, Holkem, client of ours, a housing developer, and the Swedish Institute made a joint venture in the Serra dei Giardini, the garden outside the Biennale garden, the Giardini, as a collateral event to the 18. And the theme for this exhibition, there were other architects participating with installations was to for architects to work together with companies within the building industry to develop architecture in relationship to their digital production techniques. So our task was to create an outdoor pavilion to function as a meeting space for seminars, as a stage for larger events, and also as an area to be used by the cafe, the building, when there were no events going on. Also here we started with kind of a analysis of the site and the geometry of the existing structure. You see the greenhouse is this curved, slightly curved structure to the left, and it was formed then to catch the sun. Tradition of these cast iron greenhouses from the 8th century. Our task was to create shadow protection from sun and rain. So it was then also later called Loggia d'Ombre, which means shadow pavilion. And we mirrored the geometry of the greenhouse to create a shaded place also then between the pavilion and the cafe area. So you have shadow on the ground as well as inside. we developed this diagonal structural system to have a clear structural expression just as the greenhouse has, and a height that is kind of just under greenhouse, to patient perspectives on site. The authorities have some thinking about that. And we worked as we do in digital models and in physical models, studying structure for going into production. And then we had to find a way then with Martinsson, who's a glue lamp and CLT producer in Sweden, that how to be able to build this as a structure system, possible to assemble easy on site, but also to be possible to disassemble for uses at different other places after the exhibition. And there, most of the members are all glue lamp, 56 by 200. And most of them are also just cut or with a diagonal cut. We focused more complex geometry to the diagonals, the vertical diagonals, and these joints that we wanted to be tight and a clear position with the fittings. They are visible screw heads, so to show that it is a dismantlable structure. Oops. I'll change the picture for some. Daniel, having some kind of commenting. I'll get rid of this. So, thank you. We also realized that we needed some furniture in this pavilion, and we took contact with Cheltenham furniture producer. Developed this bench and table outdoor furniture. See a mock-up, one-to-one. And we want to go. Yes.
Probably you can have the computer a bit closer. It's always very slow, and then the computer starts to fade the sound a bit off.
Okay.
It's at the limits. Let's put it that way.
Okay. We will bring it closer. Maybe you get better sound.
That's probably better, yes.
And to get a structural ID also
Better.
furniture. So you see the horizontal seating part, which is then made of wood, is carried by the leg structure and locked geometry. So when they are paired, you get self-locking stable connection. And the legs were made in cast iron. Here we see the wooden plugs that we built, and then they were sandblasted to get a more visible imprint of the wooden structure in the cast iron. So these are the prototypes it's made. So, and also the cast iron was for us interesting to investigate also in relationship to the greenhouse next to the pavilion. We also developed this cabinet that was a space to put in LED screens that could be used for seminars and for presentations. So this is the short end that worked as a stage for the event on the grass area. And some overall views of the finished pavilion, the seating area, and this raised floor, creating also a seating situation at the periphery of the pavilion. So also the edge of the pavilion becomes like a seating situation where you can sit underneath the roof, and then you can also be inside the pavilion. It has a slight silver tint paint, semi-transparent silver paint to the wooden structure to get to avoid this yellowing effect of wood over time, and also to create a little bit more of a reflection of the light during the day, and also as a comment to the metal of the greenhouse structure. The furniture was also stained in silver, and you can see the cast iron legs are black. Parallel to the development of the Venice one, we developed a sister pavilion for the Stockholm situation, where it worked as a pavilion for dialogue in relationship to regulation plan and development project. That was placed in Stockholm suburb for a couple of years. But it has now been transferred to a public park at Djurgården in Stockholm, where it will be opened up to public in the spring. The original Venice structure, after Venice traveled on to the Swedish residence in Nairobi. So both of these pavilions have got a new permanent home. Yeah, the furniture in the production version, the production by Kjellemo, and the steel fittings for the detailing had to be a bit stronger in the Stockholm context. We had to dimension that for snow loads, and also the added walls also brings wind pressure onto the structure. So it had to be a bit up dimensioning in the fittings. Before it was decided that the Venice Pavilion would travel on to Nairobi, the Swedish Institute in Paris showed interest to the pavilion. They would like to have it for the garden, and it didn't happen, and then it was a pandemic, or still is, but even more so last year. But this year, the Swedish Institute in Paris celebrated 50 years, and the Swedish Institute in Stockholm also had a Swedish design movement exhibition to be presented in Paris in September, and they wanted also here a pavilion for the garden. So we departed a bit in what we have learned in the Venice Pavilion, but in this context, we needed a more like circular or point-formed pavilion, and in the process we learned that the hexagon is also a metaphoric shape for France. The French map is often inscribed hexagon. So we used this metaphor and developed a pavilion, a hexagonal plan constructed out of triangles to be placed. And it has a similar function. It works for seminar and as a stage for talks during the design weeks. And we searched here then for a different kind of structural logic. As you know, triangles, when formed and connected to each other, forms a stable construction. So they could be connected with hinges and form a structure, a solid structure. And in plan, see the hexagonal shape. Also here, the roof is larger than the floor to create this seat generation around it. And we see here during the opening days in September, daytime, and also the opening party. It's a great event. We developed the furniture, the hexagonal table, and also the lamp together with Marie-Lis Hellgren, Swedish designer that works with circularity. And the lamp was then designed to give uplight to create a space within a light that kind of makes the space even stronger during dark out, but also the light that goes down. And on the theme of Glulam and CLT, we took part in a vital competition that we won last year in collaboration with Ward Thistleton Architects, British architect office based in London, focusing also very much on wood in all the projects, and land architecture, landscapes architect. The client here was Gotlandsen, the public housing company at Gotland, a Swedish island in the Baltic. And the task was to create their new headquarters with office spaces, also evacuation flats, storage, garage, workshop, and also spaces to be able to rent out. Here we departed kind of in the local tradition, the silhouettes of the houses in the inner city, but also these close courtyards of the agricultural farmhouses on the countryside, and the quality that they have to give a protected outdoor space, protected from wind. It's an island where it always blows, but it's also a very sunny climate. So really nice microclimate are often created in these protected courtyards. And the main theme was with the buildings to form this outdoor space that became kind of the social hub and meeting point of the whole space for the people working there, but also for all the visitors during the days. Sorry. So the center, kind of a secret garden with like a small botanic garden. It's protected. Very good climate also allows for a bit this context exotic plants and to survive on the island in other situations. And the plan we worked very much with to find it's a glulam pillar structure with CLT slabs on the first floor, and to have a structure that works all over the space to create these large span spaces for garage and workshops, and also exhibition areas and entrance areas in the bottom floor, and in the right building possible shops or office spaces for external uses. On the upper floor, the housing, flats, the yellow, pink is the office space, light blue is a space for personal showers and also lunch. And to the right again, external use. The structure was developed then as the glulam and CLT structures to create the large spans at the bottom floor, and with a clear modularity, also to allow for the project to be developed together with the client after the competition, but also to be able to rebuild in the future new holes in the slabs or shifting glass from solid if needed. And the upper pillar splits up. First, the cafe area, the entrance situation with good connection to the outdoor space in the courtyard, with the floor of polished concrete or local stone. And on the upper floor, the office space is white pillar that creates situation for a light lantern to get daylight into the center of the space of this open office situation.
Now we will show a small CLT house atelier as an extension to a 3-generation summer house place in the Stockholm archipelago. You can also see on the picture the Kerouac house that I showed earlier. And when working with CLT, you have to be as economical as when working with these pavilions. You want to avoid paying for the cutouts in the CLT boards. So in this house, you can say it's one opening in each side, and this north facade is a big window, so there is not so much CLT boards. It's also a very compact house, 40 square meters, with 3 small sleeping cabins. Each space has a possibility to see through the whole volume, or when you get to the entrance, you can also see through the house towards the water on the other side. And working with these CLT dimensions from this factory, you could have 4-meter long CLT boards that then took the load bearing from wall to wall. And then there was a central piece that was stabilizing the whole structure, and the chimney that also was stabilizing. And you can see on the CLT boards also that here the divisions are made so that one board here on the facade, for example, leans on the other two sideboards, so you don't need to have any other glue lamp slabs or something like that. Here the whole house stands on two long concrete slabs without blasting any rock, and being very concerned with the existing rock, not to destroy too much. And we reuse the form panels for the foundation slabs to make the form for the chimney. And there was also some planning in how to get these boards up on the building site. This was 20 meters from road, so the crane had to take them in a certain order to get the windows in the right space. And it's very compact, and you see the chimney also work as some sort of space divider, but it's still so you can see from one part of the house through the length of the house. Here you see one of these long foundation slabs, just connecting to the rock without blasting the rock. That is important for us to be careful to the ground. Yes. Another similar project in the nearby archipelago on the same island. There was a site with neighbors all around, so we wanted to make something that didn't take too much of the view. So we made this sort of Japanese house with a pyramid roof, standing on the ground with a deck sort of floating out over the rock. And the central piece of the kitchen and storage piece that stands free, and a light from above that lets the light come in behind that centerpiece. Here it was also some planning of saving material. So the CLT boards are the walls, of course, and that all the sliding door and windows are their own piece from floor to wall, so you don't have to pay for this part you cut out. And also a long wall that has stabilized the structure, and the roof divided in parts that then lean on this wall and the lantern. Here's a fun bit of the process for every architect to see the structure being mounted. And also taking very good care of the rocks, not blasting things that you don't need to blast, and have the stair and this deck sort of float above the landscape. And here the challenge was, of course, to not have pillars above this kitchen and let the roof sort of float above that. So the back wall there is taking the process. It's careful and respectful to the nature. And with the CLT, you have to think about how you make the installations. In this case, in some places we could have all the electricity behind the outer walls, but then if you have a wall that are seen on two parts, you have to sometimes choose if you don't cut it into the walls. So we sort of let some of the electricity lining be seen, and this corridor that gets this over lantern light down, and sliding doors also of CLT boards, so you don't have to have doors standing out in the way. Also a compact house.
Now we are also in the process working on scale housing projects, which for construction start during the next year. And Folkham. And this is a project in the Sundbyberg, Stockholm area that will be called the Tree House. It's between 8 and 10 stories housing project with 141 apartments of different sizes. Here it's in the context of densification of an existing suburb with a metro station from the 70s, where you see the colored houses are all the new housing process, and our ones are the brown and the gray one. The volumes were given in the vision plan, and our ambition was to work with this volume to connect them the neighboring three houses and see also what we could give to the context and to the surroundings. The detailing with a clear wooden character at the facade and balconies, and the detail between the facade and the floor plan. Try to keep it as simple as possible, a wide spread of sizes on the flats from 1-room apartments to 5-room with kitchen, 4 bedrooms plus kitchen, and they are all oriented and relationship to light and to sound, noise from the street in the south, views to the north. And in the housing construction, Sweden have to relate a lot to daylight qualities, accessibility, demands, of course the economic building, so to create really good floor layouts on not too large space, and also to find able to build this wood to find a clear structural logic to make it advantage for stability and CNT structure. And to give back what you can to the cities. There is a semi-public space, a commercial space at the short end. Both of the two volumes, the one could be more public, and it becomes to create a semi-public piazza close to the street. As there will be, this is also in a situation, so we will have 2 stories in concrete. Also here we have worked a lot with the hierarchy between the concrete and the wooden construction to maximize the use of wood, but also to have a clear display of the different cores. So the concrete core has a concrete facade, and the wooden structure has a wooden facade. And the wood panel is it's thermo wood. It's a product that is then preheated for longer durability, and it has also fire protection treatment to be able to build its height without the use of sprinkler in the building. The balconies are also a bit diversified due to location in the house. The ones towards the street are solid to kind of protection from noise, and the ones to the courtyard are open to provide more light and views. Another project with client Folkham is in southern part of Stockholm, Farsta. It's also a CLT and glulam situation. Here it's a long road connecting 2 areas, Farsta and Fagersjö, and the ambition from the city was to urbanize this street stretch. So the facade towards the street has this clear division of the entrance floor, but also we decided to split up the volume to create two tower-like parts connected with the lower part rather than one long big building. The development is along the water stretch to connect the Farsta to the east and Fagersjö to the west. So the new buildings will also create a more protected area towards the water with the public park stretch and biking and along the water. It's part of the lake more accessible. We have a really good position to sound. So all the apartments get kind of a south or southwest facing balcony and views over the lake and the forest to the south. The footprint of the courtyard is very small, but we have a lot of land around the building. There are also demand to keep the land on the property as with the natural qualities that it has today, so it has to be rebuilt. But there are some circular areas for barbecue or playgrounds situations. There's a sloping land slopes towards the sea, so there's like a souterrain situation, so we can work with some double high entrance areas both directions. And the street facade is more strict. You see the darker color for the entrance floors to create this division, the classical division, and also a greenhouse for a common use integrated between higher volumes that also has a roof terrace towards the water. Towards the landscape is a totally bigger scale. It's almost like a knitted glulam structure that creates the balcony zones. Seems more like a scaleless structure, bringing the whole volume together as one. There can be glazed partitions for glazed spaces integrated. And the project is also part of a pilot project to work actively with ecosystem services production. So we have proposed to integrate homes for bees, bats, and birds within the balcony structure. The illustration to the left. But also the structure also gives like a spatial order, so that when inside the space you also see the balcony space. That becomes like a part of your home.
And here the last project we will show you, it has been in process for quite a while and it will be next year. It's 5 volumes, also on a slope towards a lake. And we have been lucky this time also that we get this lake situation. Here it used to be sort of a garden atmosphere with small growing houses. So that's why we also wanted these balconies towards the lake and towards the inner courtyard to be quite big. And in the back we have this long strip of higher dwellings that will protect us from the sound from the highway. This is planned as a one bigger apartment towards the lake and 2 smaller towards the courtyard, but all have big balconies and the top floor has a terrace towards the lake. Our ambition here is to have some sliding window doors to be able to close the sides since they're quite close between the volumes, and then a mixture of either wooden volume building system or CLT, we don't know yet, and this glulam balcony system that of course has been why we have been investigating these pavilions and how we can be how this can become a good structure in this Nordic climate, and also of course inspired what we have seen in Switzerland and Austria on all these good trips that we plan to do in the future also. So maybe this will be built next time we see you in Cool.
We hope.
That was what we had today, and if there are some questions, we are happy to answer.
Thank you very much for your lecture. Thank you very much for interesting projects and how things are coming together. is there from the student side any question in the moment, or shall I? A simple thing. You said you were, your approach is very site specific. You are extremely interested in working with the site and manipulating and then doing something more with it. You test it with the pavilions and then you do it with the projects. Did I got it right? Some of your projects, the volumes are given by an urban planner, and at the end you are able just to fill, you are able to only to fill the volumes, or how does it really work as a system in Sweden? Sorry.
It's a mix in Stockholm city, and many of our projects, as these ones, the last one, Klockelund and Magelungenstrand, we have been part of the process from the start, defining the volumes in the regulation plan process. But in other projects like the treehouse, the development was made earlier with different concept for number of flats and so on. So that project came to us after the volumes were defined. And we also have other housing areas where it's kind of in Stockholm, the tendency has been to make quite detailed regulation plans. And then the regulation plans are developed with the builders and with architects that will build the houses. In other parts of Sweden, we have those projects coming up north of Stockholm. The regulation plan is made earlier, more general. It defines like a footprint and a maximum height, and then the builders and the architects that will do the projects come in later. So there are both ways are kind of possible, depending on where in Sweden.
But still, in general, the profession of the urban planner is divided from the profession of the architect. Did I got this right?
Yeah, but I would say that in most cases, architects are involved in defining the volumes, also in the regulation plans, because you have to have, when defining these plans, you have to have knowledge of possible floor plan layouts, house depths, and the sizes of footprints that are rational also for the future planning of houses.
So that's a bit the point where I want to come out at the end. It's that not the system itself is at the end a problem for what you develop and what you try to research, and is not blocking you. That's sometimes a problem if these professions are too much separated from each other, then you have always these collaboration problems and things. And I think at the end it's helpful to be very early in the early stage there. And I think your strength is really that you take attention to the site and intervene in the site and try to manipulate it to bring a project there which only can stand there, which is not a very Swedish way.
Maybe not.
What I've seen, because it's often.
No, our experience is that it's always good to try to be one step ahead, because even if the process of the project we work like in each phase by phase, but you have to be at least one step ahead to see what's coming in the next phase, to be prepared and be able to see what we decide in this phase. That's kind of that will bring the consequences in the next phase. So you really have to think many steps ahead as well.
Another thing you are very much interested is structure. I think all the projects have on one hand a structural theme in it, and where you, it's not just building walls and something is doing it, it's developed out of the structure, and the idea is always combined with the building process and the structure. Can you say something on that subject?
I mean, that's usually economical and functional challenge if you build a smaller house or a bigger house. But if you want CLT or the glulam or whatever system you work with, if you want that to define the architecture or be part of the architecture, then you have to get your knowledge about that material and what structure you can make to get some interesting spaces, big or small. Some clarity of how it's built.
Mm.
And that's what makes these, that's why we also take time to use Pavilion and also the private houses, because in these smaller projects, structure is often visible. I mean, in the pavilions, you see it all. You can't hide anything. And also in CLT houses, also part of the wiring is more trickier to hide, and you have the whole structure exposed in the interiors. You have. For us, it's interesting to integrate structure with space and aesthetics, the whole character of the buildings.
It's harder in these housing projects to get some. It's a logical structure, but it doesn't really give a lot of big architectural spaces inside. So in some way, you have to show this on the outside or in some very simple form.
Mm. Your approach is, the structure is quite important, the material is quite important. Do you always work with the same people, like in large projects, like the builders, like the construction firm or the methods? Or is this common sense what you do, that you can really work with, they all can work with this? Or is it are you triggering the system at the moment?
Yeah, I think we have been searching for the right people who wants to work with it. It's not so easy. You have to find them.
Especially for the structural engineers to have that they have kind of ambition and curiosity to do what they have not done exactly before. And also, since building in wood, fire and acoustics are big questions also here. You need experienced people that are willing to go into this new way of construction, not just going back to how it has always been done.
Mm.
Or in a small project, you have to find the builders or clients that just don't want to do the usual thing.
But isn't that as well why you are so much interested in wood? Because there, the research and the architecture research is much more open than in other materials and possibilities in Sweden. There, at the moment, a lot of research is happening and a lot of things are happening.
Yeah, that's true. Since, and it's of course driven by the climate situation, and also so within this group of clients that wants to do projects in wood, and builders that wants to do structures in wood, and engineers and technical consultants, there's a kind of a novelty and curiosity and kind of a feeling of we are doing this together. That it's a good energy, I would say. It's very much teamwork between all involved.
So then you always work with the same people, or the people are you often, Folchem is quite an important partner, or was. You have often the same people you are working with as clients and as even engineers and builders, or how do you approach this kind of things?
I mean, the client, we have been lucky that we have gotten quite a few projects from Folchem. And the engineers, in some cases, we have chosen them, or in some other cases, we have not chosen them. They are still in the field of specialists in wood. And
there are like a number of different structural engineers that we have worked with for smaller and for that come back. They keep coming back. Yeah. We can introduce them to new clients, and they come back also since they have the expertise.
by luck, some structural engineering we have worked with in a small housing project is suddenly coming up as a proposal in a big housing project. So that's good for us.
And that's for sure an interesting play with the smaller works, which are a bit more quite a playful way of working. And then that starts a thinking process where it can pop up in other projects which are more complicated. And that's an interesting way of working, that things are going on different levels and scales. What I was asking myself, you talked about sustainability and all these kind of questions. And what's interesting, if you do this fire protection question, is the wood at the end still able to be earth at the end, or you need to burn it?
I couldn't say in detail, but this project here, the last one, Klockelund, the client here and has chosen this project to be part of a research project. It's RISE, it's a research organization funded by money from the state, and they have a big project on the circularity within wooden housing constructions. So Klockelund will be a case. So when we get started in the next phase in the more detailed planning, that perspective will be part of, and that's, I mean, that's in the, this actually be in the plan is then what do we do with these buildings in 50 years if we want to dismantle them? How can the different parts of the building be reused? And also how can we possibly use reused materials when constructing them? Also, I mean, they are in wood, but also within a wood building, you have to think actively about circularity.
Or just what I have seen when I was visiting you in your office and the visits we have done. Sweden was for sure in construction and in the way they deal and experiment with wooden buildings far ahead from Switzerland. Now we are catching a bit up. And this was always interesting for me to experience and to see this kind of development. Where do you, but Swedish, the position of the architect in the system in Sweden is not so easy. What I experienced or what I have learned, is it changing or is it something happening through this discussion of wood, or is it is something changing in the building system?
Yes, I think it has changed a bit. That so some clients know that it's worth to choose an architect that has some ambition.
And also to keep the architect
Yes.
all through the building process. We have been, that's the plan for our clients we worked with. We try to make it clear that we want to be through the whole process. And also because often in the later phases, the client buys the construction of the house from a building company. Then they have to actively say that they want the architect to follow in that last step. And so far, that's what our client said.
I think that's an important thing. If you're not able to follow it to the end, then all kind of strange solutions can come in, and everybody else makes decisions except the one who has an idea and tries to build to form an architecture out of it and the space out of it. And that's really a problem. That's as well the question I had at the beginning about the urban planning, that you are from the urban planning to the end part of the whole discussion and not kicked out because you have all these experts who have no idea how to bring these things together. There, at the end, you have a collage and not an architecture idea. That's a bit what happens, and you try to formulate architecture with space and material out of the whole thing. where your references or inspiration is coming from? What was for you super important, where you realized where you want to go, or where you want to yeah, where you want to position your office?
But when we started as teaching together, and then I had worked in Poor with concept and traveled around in the Graubünden area for a year and a half in Switzerland. And Katarina had studied in Copenhagen and had friends in the area. Yeah. So she had also been in that area. So when we were teaching for 3 years, we went there with students and looked at a lot of projects, smaller private houses. And at that time, that's then 15, 20 years ago, I mean, Austria and Switzerland, you had all these CLT, the first CLT projects were coming up. We had the Plazas houses, and the Cour scene at the time interested us a lot, also from my experience from working there and from what we saw during the year. So when we went back with students, we visited them, and then some years later, when we decided to start our office, we had these trips as a common reference. It was the Swiss and Austrian scene that has kind of relationship to the Danish tradition as well of sharp architecture that is kind of conceptually clear from the start to the end of construction. So it's been an important reference for us.
And what's important, what you can see down there in the Cour area, is also that the architects that today are very big, they started in a small scale and put their whole heart into those small projects, and that then helps you when you go up in scale. And it might be easier to get the detailing all the way in a small project. Costs a lot more hours, but it's worth it than when you should do the bigger projects. So that's something we have learned when we see all these Sumtor, Beate Plazas, or wherever it can be down there, that you have showed us partly. And that's also something that we can say to the students, that take those small projects and test and make some good out of that, and then you will grow into the big projects.
Mm-hmm. You're really interested in handcraft, in materiality.
Yes.
And I think that's handcraft, mainly handcraft, is quite a difficult thing in Sweden. How you deal with this? At the beginning you started, or with the smaller projects, you often collaborated with artists, or with really people who are able to do this handcraft work. And now you switched over to the CNC machine. Is this the new handcraft, or how do you bring these things a bit together? Because you love to work with the material, and you love the building site, and you love to bring these things together. How do you bring in this human force of doing something, as well as a piece of an element at the end, which creates as well the space?
But it's a combination, like for the private houses, for example. I mean, the CLT structure is pre-cut and detailed and delivered with exact positioning. But then on site, it has to be cladded, insulated, windows fitted, the details has to be done. So in these cases, we had really good carpenters and builders.
Yes.
In a really tight dialogue to get this good detailing interior-wise and also exterior-wise. Then,
but this is a challenge in the housing production. We know that.
In the large-scale housing production, it's a modification. So there you have to even,
and how do you
understand, you have to be kind of prepared to have like intelligent. I mean, for these balconies in this project here, we have to have a really good solution that is solved. So when it arrives on site, it should be a montage without any surprises on site. and still there you still need really good people that want to work with wood, mount it in the right way and do the finishing.
Mm.
And I
But
think within the wooden construction company, I mean, there is a pride within companies as well to do a good work. Then if you are there and you have a dialogue so that you understand each other, we understand the challenge in the work they have to do, and they understand what we want to achieve. But to get this dialogue or to meet the people on site, it gets more complicated in the longer on the project.
Your learning project or the intelligent project which brought you further, mainly the houses, they were more on the countryside. Did I understand this well?
Yes.
Just the countryside a place of experiment where you can do much more further development in architecture, or is it different, or is it just a scale which makes it much more easy to work with?
It's about the client. I mean, it doesn't matter, I think, if you make a summer house in the archipelago or if you have a villa client somewhere close to the city. It's about the client, and also, of course, the building regulations, maybe what you can do. But and in the housing projects, of course, that's more. It's a longer process, so it's more controlled.
But
controlled by
the building regulations and the city plan, height rules. I mean, you have a lot of daylight or accessibility rules.
That way you also have to be like one step ahead to take them into account. Start to integrate those solutions in the design.
And you find as well in Stockholm the same handicraft capacities, or is it still possible to work with them? I mean, cost-wise, I mean, do you find these people there? It's a question.
I mean, this house is the tree house, or this one is out on tender. There is quite a lot of entrepreneurs that are interested. So it seems like there is a big interest in building good housing.
That's kind of new. We had a tender out a couple of years ago for a housing project, and at that time it was hard to find bidders or entrepreneurs that wanted to build a large wooden house in the Stockholm area. But now many interested, because most major construction companies has also seen that they have to learn to build in wood and to offer that possibility as well. So I think the wood building knowledge is kind of developing fast, and there are more and more roads of reference coming up. And the wood production, the CLT, we have now like 4 production plants or 5, I think. Sweden used to be 1 a couple of years ago. When we did the Venice Biennale, it was 1. It's only 3 years ago. Now there are 4 or 5. So the industry is kind of working to meet the demand.
So is it still possible at the moment to build in concrete?
Yes, I mean, it's still more being built in concrete than in wood.
No, it's just
we had a debate last summer, since the largest cement mining situation in Sweden was temporarily stopped. Now they got a prolongation for another year, but the mining for cement shaft will end.
But there are some new climate regulations that will start from next year, 2022. So there will be a change for how you build in concrete also. You have to take some.
I'm just asking this question because I see a bit that more and more competitions which were done, projects in wood are winning.
That's good.
I had conversations with people from France, for example, where they really, if you don't do any wooden projects, you can't win a public competition. And the problem, for example, in France, in the area of Grenoble, is they have no really experience to work with in large scale wood projects. So at the end, you have this contrast of a political interest or will and the competence which are missing, or the offices which are not missing, and even more that the wood is not here, that you can't really build so much as they like in wood. That's another question. So how's the situation in Sweden?
I mean, we also had we have a project. It's a decision, political decision. Tomorrow, it's north of Stockholm. There was a competition for building situation of housing, and the city was clear. They didn't say it, but it was clear to understand that they will project in wood. Our client that had not built in wood in that scale in this area before also saw that. So we made a proposal to say, okay, we want to do this building and we will do it in wood. And there the politicians, the decision will be tomorrow, but that's the way to go. So here the politicians said, yes, we want wood and building here. And it also pushed the builders to realize that's what we have to offer. We should get this project. Then we also have a big discussion on our forestry situation, and it's kind of parallel how we tend our forests in Sweden. It's kind of parallel with the building industry, but the outtake of timber is, I think, is only like 20% or so. Most part of the forests that is to pellets or paper or other products. So it's a process of also actually using our forests in a better way, building houses instead of burning them for.
But then you need as well an infrastructure to take it out, to cut it into the pieces, to glue it together, to build it, and to do this kind of construction. If you don't have this segment of the production line, then you have a problem. Of course, wooden buildings you could produce as well in, let's say, in Russia and bring it over here, because it's all this element thing, or often.
Yeah, but also now with Katarina said, with these climate declarations coming up, and in the next phase also making demands on our client Folkham for some of the projects. I mean, you can build in CLT, but the climate impact of the CLT also differs depending on where it's produced, what energy they use on the site, and how they transport it to the construction site. That made quite a big difference for different CLT users. So,
and the problem is, if one piece does not fit, you always have the huge problem if it's too far away that you can't wait for that piece in the whole building site. That's always another thing.
Also, the local production, the value of local production has also became clear to many parts of industry during the pandemic, since there has been so. I mean, the global delivery systems kind of failed a lot during the pandemic, and then it suddenly became an advantage to rely on local production to a greater extent. Although maybe a couple of years ago that was seen as more expensive, it actually turned out to be safer deliveries at the time. So it's kind of an interesting development as well.
Yeah, that's a huge difference which is now happening. And but your projects, you get most of the projects, at least the larger ones, you get always Oh yes, it's not direct commissions. It's usually a competition. Did I got it right? It's always competitive in most of the cases.
Direct commissions from the client that has the building right. For others, for many others, we have kind of teamed up with the client and made a proposal to get so that the client gets the land and we get the commission. So that we present like a proposal of what to be built there to the landowner, often the city. Then there's a negotiation on the price as well. When it comes to project, then we work on the project together with the client. So there are different modes, but in many situations, at least in Stockholm and neighboring areas, the communities still have a lot of land that they own, and they plan the land, they also define the building right in dialogue with the builders, and they sell the land. Then there are different ways to sell the land. Often some kind of proposals or possible design.
And the projects are usually the Stockholm, for example, they have the land. They ask different builders and teams to give in something, or they have a pre-studies done, and then at the end it's sold to people, or is it more a community housing thing? Because I think even Stockholm has this as a housing problem, as mainly all the towns in Europe.
And there is a demand for us, and there are like two main systems. There are like owner apartments, where as this project here, Klokkelund, it will be an association formed from the buyers, so that they own these buildings together. So then it becomes it's a kind of a common ownership form. And then we also have a system of rental apartments, where building company owns the building and you only rent your apartment. It's kind of a social housing system, but without the subsidiaries. You have to. A new production of rental apartments are quite expensive compared to older.
Yeah, there is a lot of housing being built in the Stockholm, Uppsala, Västerås area now. So yeah, they say maybe it's even too much, but we haven't seen that yet.
No.
No, because I'm just asking a bit, because in Zurich, for example, this housing situation, social housing is a huge impact on the whole building building process, because especially if you have this social housing thing at the end, they always try to bring in as well a public value and public spaces, shops and stores and other cultural spaces into the whole thing, which brings at the end life, much more life than if you sell the apartments. They usually it's a monoculture. And it's even a monoculture culturally, and the types of society you bring in. That's quite an interesting development, which is happening here in Zurich at the moment. And how is this is in Stockholm? Because you have a huge impact since years of development needed.
In this planning process was where there are, in most cases, there are a number of clients involved, like between 5 or 10 different builders with their architects. There is often a mix then between clients that want to make these apartments that to sell and the rental apartments. So, because they have different markets. For rental apartment, you pay a rent, you don't have to buy it. Get money to get into the housing market. And then, of course, the city, I mean, their ambition is to have to work actively with the entrance floor, creating possibilities for commercial spaces, and that's often then also regulated in the regulation plan. 30% of the bottom floor should be commercial space, and all those kind of writings.
which is more and more a problem because the stores are disappearing.
Yeah, it's a challenge for the builders to find a user or a taker for these areas.
An interesting user which really is able to bring in some life.
But then it was important maybe to over time to make it possible. I mean, 10 years maybe the demand is there again. But you know, since it's changing, the patterns are changing.
To come back a bit again to architecture, what's interesting in your work is you have your office in Stockholm, locally based. A lot of your projects are there. Your references are, let's say, worldwide or at least European-wide. You know these projects by yourself. And even with your projects like Venice was an important place for you to go there, to come back, to think about architecture and so on. So it's on one hand, it's a very local practice. And on the other hand, you have quite a large, let's say, a European perspective on architecture. Can you talk a bit about this? Because I think it's quite an interesting one that you're not just circling about your own questions. You're much more, you are involved in a larger picture of things. Like, for example, we met this autumn in Paris, where you had your exhibition, your pavilion there, which is an interesting thing that it's always very large.
But there we have been lucky that Folkham or Swedish Institute or Swedish Wood also have asked us to do these pavilions as a part of exporting the Swedish wood in a more industrial way. And we have, when we get the question, we very quick say yes before we even know how much work it includes. So for us, that's a very important part that we get outside of Scandinavia. And of course, we would like to develop this into something more than pavilions, but we have to do these bigger housing projects in Stockholm area first, we think.
But it's a good way also to, because it's quite easy to become an office that are very focused on the local production, and then you are these trips and exhibitions and visits to other projects outside also kind of brings a perspective on our own work, so that we're not just limited by the actual situation here and now. We have to, context is help to see further out or to think about architecture and not just to get outside the production perspective and the rational perspective to seek inspiration, energy. It's
the energy. Yeah, and then that's why as well you enter in projects like the Stockholm Library project, which you haven't shown, where you were in a London in teams with British architects, with Swedish architects, and suddenly you are in a completely different way of thinking, which gives a completely different energy as well to the office. And I think that makes it interesting and fun to work.
Yeah, we learn a lot with exactly with Caruso St. John and with what Thistleton were both great experiences. It's nice to see. I mean, we share this kind of bit what Thistleton. They're also very focused on wood. They've done a lot of projects like that in London, and a good collaboration in Scotland project, and we're also helping them with the Stockholm project. So it's, collaboration is, when it works, it's really valuable. You learn a lot and you get help each other.
Just last question, but where do you think is the largest potential on architecture? Where do we really can do something with architecture? What's the power of it?
I mean, we have a lot of problems in Sweden now with the outer suburb areas with shootings and gang fights and things like that. And now we are also involved in some infill projects in these problem areas, we could call them areas from the 60s. And like this tree house here, if it can upgrade some sort of housing in that area. We have a lot of these areas in Sweden, and there's a lot of these areas in Europe, or in everywhere in the States. So if we in some way can make more human additions in these housing areas, so people are proud of living there.
Yeah, bring architectural qualities into this context. As we spoke just before the lecture about reflecting on the last Venice Biennale, the Aravena, that created that was very clear, and that's the main focus. We have the sustainable goals. We have to build socially sustainable and ecologically sustainable houses. That's a great challenge. But at the same time, we have to also develop kind of culturally sustainable structures, and it still has to be good architecture. We can't only do social or only do ecological buildings. We also have to provide a controlled development and make buildings that people are proud of or enjoy life. The strong driver for building a wood is that it also becomes attractive to live in a wooden house that brings new qualities.
And I think that's the main power we have, because we can really with good architecture we can really influence the society. And what's quite, I had a discussion last week, and there was the question, what's really what does the architect needs to bring in? And it was quite interesting. Still in the 50s, there was the question of doing artistically relevant architecture and bringing in a high architecture with a high social value. And I think this was a really good description on what architecture can be. It's not the formal thing. It's much more a tool which brings so much things, structure, and all these needs we have, all these developments we have together, even social life, and at the end we create something, and it's not just an Excel sheet which we can fill in with all the people and numbers. And that's, I think, a very important tool we have in our society, which we should use. And this is our task.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are
Any
working.
questions from the students? There is silence. Yeah, I want to thank you very much for your time, and that it was possible that you prepared the lecture. For me, it's always interesting to exchange with you and to develop together with these projects, with this thinking. And I think I really enjoy this talk on where is the value of architecture. Now, we shouldn't underestimate this power, what we can create. And that's a bit why I do this series now, of these different lectures, this time of the possibilities of architecture, what we can do. And that's a bit gives me a bit the chance. So the next lecture we will have on the 14th of December, Antonio Di Rossi, an architect from Turin, who will talk about Alpine architecture, but in the perspective, an Italian perspective. And I'm really looking forward to that perspective, because it's always interesting to see and to think what we can do with our tools as an architect. and it's much more than just filling volumes, and we bring life to spaces and to towns, and that's interesting. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting us, and thank you for walking with us a bit here. It's good to share.
See you soon.
Good luck,
Bye.
everybody. Yeah.
Thank you
Hope to
very
see you.
much. Have a nice evening. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.